right. Cool. Hello, everyone. My name is Wesley. This is Wu Can Cook. Today we're doing one of my favorite Chinese dishes, which is a lion's head meatball, which is braised in a dark soy sauce base. One of my favorite dishes because I used to eat it when I was growing up a lot. It's one of the things that we used to order at the restaurants a lot, and never really actually figured it out how to make it until pretty recently, actually, when I asked my dad how he makes it. So we're going to be running through some of that stuff today. If you have any questions for me, feel free and drop your questions in the chat. If this is your first time catching one of these streams, we're here every Monday, Tuesday, and Thursday at 6:30 PST. With new recipes out over on the YouTube channel every Friday, so that's a good place to be. So that means that tomorrow we have a recipe coming out for egg rolls and lumpia, which I'm super stoked for because it is a very confusing subject matter. If you've ever looked into what are the differences between egg rolls, lumpia, and spring rolls, we're going to talk about that because I don't know what the differences are. So we're going to check all of that stuff out. So if you're interested in stuff like that, definitely hop over to the YouTube channel and tune in for that stuff because we're going to be figuring it out. If you have any questions about this particular dish, though, this recipe, it's already up over on the YouTube channel, as with pretty much everything that I cook on stream. Almost everything already exists on recipe form over on the YouTube channel, so if you're trying to reproduce the things that I'm cooking, that's a good place to go and start. Because those recipe videos, they tend to move a little bit slower, and we kind of talk through everything that I'm doing and why I add certain things, why I leave some stuff out, what are the things that are traditional, and what are the things that don't really belong, but I like adding anyway, stuff like that. And also they're a lot more concise because I don't ramble as much. So if you're trying to reproduce the things that I'm cooking, that's a good place to start. But anyway, oh yeah, before I forget, we're working our way to 4,000 subs by the end of the month, so if you want to help us hit our subscriber goal, please hop over and subscribe. If you're watching on Reddit or YouTube, you're already there. If you're watching on Reddit, that's the channel at the bottom of the screen. So anyway, you'll notice that what we're doing, first off, as with many things that I cook on stream, I'm starting by crushing and mincing some garlic here, but you probably noticed that we're doubling it. So this is almost an entire clove of garlic that we're doing right now. This is almost an entire clove of garlic that we're crushing up right now, which is a lot, and that's because it belongs in two different places. So we're going to throw our garlic. First half of it is going to go into the meatballs themselves, and the second half of it is going to go straight into the wok fry as part of our aromatics. So all of that stuff we're going to get to shortly. Hermina, how's it going? Uh-oh, what did I do? I don't know, Hermina, what did I do? What happened? Yeah. So, for our garlic, we're giving it a good smash, and then we're going to chop this stuff up. Once you crush your garlic, you really don't need to do much else. Just give it a quick chop. Things just sort of fall apart. And that's because the allicin, once you start crushing your garlic, will sort of just release from the garlic. And that's really about everything that you need to do in order to get the flavor out of that garlic. But it is, in my opinion, the most important part about how you work with garlic is how you crush it. Because if you don't crush that garlic, it's not going to taste like anything, and then you're just going to have large chunks of garlic floating around in your wok fry, which is never very useful. So what I'm doing is I'm going to chop all of this up, and then what we're going to do is divide it in two here. So first half. So I'm going to take half of this garlic and we're going to throw it into our mixing bowl. That's about half. And that's going to go into our meatballs. Then I'm going to take the second half. And we're going to set it aside, and these are going to work as the aromatics for our wok fry later on. And this is actually going to go into the wok fry rather than the other half, which are going to get mixed into our meatballs. Oh, Hermina, I'm glad that you caught it. What did I do? Yeah, if you were watching, I think that was on stream. I think it was on Tuesday. I cut myself, during the stream. And I don't know if anyone noticed, but I put the glove on mid-stream, or somewhere in the middle. It was while I was chopping the mushrooms. and I guess I was smooth enough with it that nobody noticed that I did it. But I feel like I even said it on stream that I just cut myself. But what had happened was I was chopping. So if there is a way that you cut yourself, if there's a good way to cut yourself when you're chopping, it should be the way that I chopped it. So for what it's worth, I cut myself in the right way. So I was chopping, and I wasn't paying attention. This happens a lot. Actually, this is like one of the biggest downsides with working with a French knife is because it's very, very thin profile. And if you pull the knife up too far, it will come down on your knuckle, which is like not as bad as cutting your finger off. But so what happened was I grazed the knuckle, and then I just gave myself a nasty cut there. So not as bad as cutting your finger off, but also not great. And it's like one of the main downsides of using a really slim profile knife, with a knife like this. Also, just like careless knife technique. You shouldn't pull the knife that high when you're chopping, but I wasn't paying attention. Seems like the chat on Reddit isn't working. Let me pull the Reddit chat up on my phone. Cool. Yeah, this chat on RPM is not working. Yeah, it's just not working. Oh well. Cool. I'm gonna pull the chat up over on my phone, so I will be able to see even less of the chat than I usually do. But so if I miss anything on the Reddit chat, it's because I can't really see what you guys are saying, but I can see some of it. So yeah, crush the garlic. Yeah. Is this egg roll? No, this is not egg roll. That's coming out tomorrow, actually. So it's coming out tomorrow. But yeah, super confusing. I'm really excited for the egg roll video because it's been one that I've been trying to crack for a while, but it's also just like a thing that's been really like essential to like my childhood is like making egg rolls with the family like on like holidays and stuff. But it's also very interesting, and one of the reasons why I've been avoiding it is because I've been trying to figure out, or at least have some sort of answer to the question of what is the difference between an egg roll, a lumpia, and a spring roll. So mainly, most folks will know it as an egg roll comes from Chinese food, a spring roll comes from Vietnamese food, and a lumpia comes from Filipino food. And then we have to decide, like, okay, so those are where the main differences, the cultural differences of where they come from. But what are the actual differences? Like, what do they actually look like, and how are they actually different in real life? And the answer is, there's no difference. They're all the same thing, I think. I think they're all genuinely the same thing, and I have even seen some packages refer to egg rolls referred to as spring rolls. Sometimes I see spring rolls referred to as lumpia. Sometimes I see egg roll wrappers referred to as wonton wrappers because you're technically making egg rolls out of wonton wrappers. It's all very confusing and almost not really that important. So we're going to dive into that in the recipe that's going out tomorrow. But essentially, to answer your question, the difference is that an egg roll is made with a wonton wrapper. So if you are familiar with egg rolls as they are found in a lot of Americanized Chinese cuisine, which is probably where most egg rolls will come up. They're really puffy, so they have this really interesting blistered exterior quality to it, and that's happening because they're made with wonton wrappers, which I think have some egg in it. So there's some form of rise that's happening in that dough, and then when they get thrown into the deep fry, it starts blistering in a really interesting way, and that's how you get those really puffy and crunchy egg rolls. Whereas a lumpia or a spring roll, either of which, both of which, maybe they're the same thing, I don't really know, is made with a much thinner wrapper, which gives you that really iconic, super thin, super crispy egg roll. Which maybe you can call it an egg roll, maybe you can call it a spring roll, maybe you call it a lumpia. I don't know. It doesn't. I don't understand. And at one point, I just kind of gave up. So. But yeah, we are going to answer that age-old question of what the hell is the difference tomorrow. So if you haven't checked out the YouTube channel yet, definitely hop over and subscribe if you want to keep an eye out for that stuff. That's if you're watching on Reddit, the YouTube channel at the bottom of the screen. If you're watching on YouTube, it's the channel you're already on. Oh, is the purple hand my mixing hand? That would actually make sense. I should probably wear gloves when I mix stuff. But no, it's my guide hand. So it like the knife comes down on it. So if you ever there's a big band-aid on it now, but if you ever looked at my right hand before, so this finger on this particular knuckle has like 5 different scars on it because I've done it many times. So it's like, at this point when it happens, I barely even react to it, which is probably why no one realized it when I cut myself yesterday. But it was weird that no one even realized that I had put a glove on midstream, and I was also like kind of bleeding, so. But yes, I did cut myself. Yeah. Cool. All right, let's see. Yes. Just freeze. All right, so next up, what do I want to do? Let's finish up our veggies first. So the next thing I'm going to do is chop up some veggies here for our wok fry. So if you've ever made a lion's head meatball before, you'll know that you can throw in really whatever kind of vegetable that you want. I think the one that I was basing this recipe on actually doesn't use what we're going to use, which is baby bok choy. The one that I was inspired by uses spinach in the original recipe, which I really didn't like when I was a kid. I remember I used to pick out the spinach because it's really gross. I don't like spinach. I definitely don't like braised spinach. So I used to pull it out and then like kind of eat around it, which was like always frustrated my parents because it was basically like when I'm sure like most kids when they were young, they probably like picked up broccoli and stuff. I used to eat around bok choy bok choy and spinach and like gailan. So today what we're going to use is actually, this is not bok choy, this is baby bok choy, which is a little bit different from full-grown bok choy. And what we're going to do is chop it up really, really thin. So if you can't find bok choy, or if you can't find what we're using today, you can really use whatever you want. You could use you could probably do it with broccoli, you could do it with spinach, you could do it with kale, any kind of leafy green would work. All of those things would be fine. Today I'm using baby bok choy because it's what I have, but also it's my favorite thing to use in this dish. So. Okay, so for our bok choy today, since this is a baby bok choy, we're not actually going to chop it too much. So if you're familiar with bok choy, you'll know that it's usually much larger. So it's usually like about this large or so, and it's a deeper shade of green. So it's probably like closer to like forest green. I guess that's relatively descriptive. Baby bok choy is a little bit different, mostly in the fact that it's picked a little bit earlier. So baby bok choy is picked while it's a little bit younger, and that does a couple of things. But mainly the thing that it does is it kind of makes it a little bit less bitter. So if you've ever had bok choy and it has a really like biting quality to it, that's coming from the fact that you're using full-grown bok choy. So. Generally, if you see me using bok choy, I'm probably using baby bok choy. I generally don't eat full-grown bok choy too much because I really dislike that super bitter quality to it. And actually, the more that I have like eaten at Chinese restaurants, I very rarely come across like full-grown bok choy. I mostly just see baby bok choy because of that bitter quality. So. Oh, Jexy, okay, Jexy, yeah, good question. That was actually what I was just answering. Yeah, so it's mostly about the flavor. So that full-grown bok choy, as it matures, it has a little bit more bitterness to it. So it's like, the only way I can think of describing it right now is like, I just really disliked it when I was a kid. It's very, very bitter. It's that quality about vegetables when you're growing up where it's like, really gross and not palatable, and it's just like the thing that kind of makes you want to wash it down with water and just hold your nose. It's that quality. That's the thing that it always reminded me of, is just like choking vegetables down. That's the flavor of full-grown bok choy, where it's really, really bitter in like a very unpleasant way. At least that's it for me. I don't know how other people see full-grown bok choy, but that's how I've always felt about it. So I always use baby bok choy. which is a little bit less bitter. It has a little bit more crisp qualities to it. It's not quite as chewy either. And it's also just like a little bit more like sweet, a little bit sweeter in flavor. But also like very, very leafy and very healthy. So that's our bok choy. I'm gonna set that aside and then we're going to throw that into our wok fry at the very, very end. It's gonna be the last thing that goes into our wok fry. All right. So back to our meatballs here. So this is our meatball bowl. Right now what we have in here is some garlic and ginger, and then we're gonna throw a bunch of other stuff in here. Eventually what we'll get in here is some ground pork. I'm gonna do it very last so I don't have to clean stuff. Oh, please make me low. Yeah, sorry, it looks like I missed your question. Yeah, so no lion's mane mushrooms. No, not in the lion's head meatball. Why is it called? I'm assuming what you're asking is why is it called lion's head meatball? I have no idea. I think it's about the shape of the meatball. I think it has to do with the fact that it's like a really, really large meatball. But I could be wrong about that too. I really don't know. But yeah, my best guess is that it has to do with the fact that the meatballs that we're gonna make are pretty large. So they're not like smaller like spaghetti meatballs, which are like kind of more close to the size of like a ping pong ball. They're gonna be like pretty large, and generally like in the like general size of like closer to a tennis ball, maybe even closer to a baseball. So they're pretty large, and I would guess that's why they're referred to or colloquially referred to as a lion's head meatball. Yeah. Yeah, cool. Do I get any API hit? Oh yeah, totally. Oh, do I defend it? Yeah. Yeah, no, yeah, so I guess, yeah, that should be something we talk about. So I live in Chinatown, here in Oakland, Chinatown, which is, I guess, like, if you're probably watching on the news, Oakland, Chinatown, and San Francisco, Chinatown have been on the news lately, especially, like, in the States, because a lot of crazy shit is happening here. And basically, I don't know if other people haven't noticed this, I guess if other people haven't heard about this, but basically there's people going around pushing old Chinese people over. Like really, really aggressively. A couple of them have died because a bunch of people have just like run up behind them and just shoved them really hard. And if you push a 80-year-old woman hard enough, they will fall and they're probably gonna die because they're really, really frail. So there's a lot of press coverage going on right now about all this stuff. So people don't just generally mess with me because, yeah, I generally don't have that problem because I'm not an old Asian person. But definitely I have experienced plenty of my share of hate. And actually there's an article that I was going to share which I did write a guest blog for, which kind of like dives into like my experience as an Asian American, mostly in the music scene because I was playing music when I wrote it. So I'll share that. Yeah, I'm going to share that over on the YouTube channel. So if you're looking for that stuff, definitely tune over into the YouTube channel. And I'm going to share that on the community tab soon. Thank you for asking though. Do I carry a knife though? I don't carry a knife, mostly because I don't have a knife to carry. I just have a lot of chef's knives, which you can't really like conceal carry. But I am part of a really great community group that's called Compassion Oakland. They're a really great nonprofit. And what they do is they gather community groups to do walks during the middle of the day, mostly during the time at which Chinatown is open or like bustling in business. So I don't know if other people have been paying attention to the news, but a lot of the businesses have been suffering. Mostly like a lot of like, there's been a lot of fires that a lot of those buildings have been set on fire. So 3 or 4 of the buildings in my neighborhood have been set on fire. There've been like arson attacks, a lot of like armed robbery, a lot of crazy shit is happening. So by the way, if you're like familiar with Oakland, Chinatown, that's not something that normally happens here. That's something that has specifically happened within the last couple of months, where there's like a bunch of arson, a bunch of like restaurants getting burned down, a bunch of people just getting robbed at gunpoint. And none of these are things that normally happen. So yeah, definitely pretty crazy. And I will share all of these resources over on the YouTube channel. So if you're looking for them, please tune into the YouTube channel and keep an eye out for those resources. Cool. So what I just finished chopping up, I just got sidetracked. maybe a quarter cup of water chestnuts. If you're not familiar with water chestnuts, they don't really taste like anything. Yeah, they're mostly just like very, very crunchy, which I love. That's one of my favorite qualities about water chestnuts, though, is that they don't taste like anything. They just have a really, really interesting texture to them. So if you throw them into a meatball, you get this really, really interesting crunch that comes with it. That just like gives a nice bit of texture to a meatball, so that your meatball isn't just like sort of like soft or like too soft, because we are going to be using a lot of ground pork today. Yeah, so we are going to be using a lot of ground pork and then some panko breadcrumbs. So the water chestnuts, they have this nice interesting bite to them. So if you can't find water chestnuts, or if you don't have any on hand, my next favorite sub is bamboo shoots, or really anything that is like crunchy and not going to be too flavorful. So someone mentioned this on stream recently, and I thought it's actually a really good sub, is a hikama, which also is like very, very crunchy, crispy. Kind of has the texture of an apple, but it also doesn't really taste like anything. It's just like very, very crunchy. So that's what we're looking for here. It's not actually any flavor. Let's see. Next up, that's a full pound of ground pork, followed by, this is going to be half a cup of panko breadcrumb. So if you are paying attention, panko breadcrumb, it does not belong in any Chinese food. No Chinese restaurant ever uses panko. Well, maybe lots of Chinese American restaurants use panko. But panko breadcrumb, it actually comes from Japanese food. And it is really, really useful in a meatball. I love using panko breadcrumb in this recipe because I think it yields for like a much more tender meatball. The more traditional thing that you would find in a recipe like this is actually cornstarch. So my dad, who is Shanghainese, swears by the use of cornstarch. And I tried it once or twice, and I just found that it didn't quite bind as well. And it just sort of like, I mean, it still worked. It was still a meatball, but it wasn't quite as tender, and it wasn't quite as like chewy and toothsome. So I love using panko, but the more traditional thing to do would be use cornstarch. So. Yeah, thank you for asking. That's a really great question. I'm glad that someone reminded me to talk about that. But yeah, I've been doing a lot of community walks with a lot of friends, which is kind of like I guess people have been calling it like community patrols, which makes it sound like I'm a big armed dude carrying a gun, just walking around being a security guard. But that's not like, it's really not it. It's just like me and a couple of friends just kind of walk around and like make sure that old people don't get pushed over. This is like, it's not like nearly as threatening or cool as it sounds. Cool. So for our pork here, I'm going to do a really quick marinade. We're not going to get too fancy on this marinade, mostly because we don't want to introduce too many liquid elements here. Otherwise, we're going to have some trouble getting it to bind. So that was 4 tablespoons of soy sauce and 2 tablespoons of sesame oil. And that's it. We're not going to add any other liquid elements here. And that's to make sure that this meatball still holds together. If we add too many liquid elements, it's going to start falling apart. The other really, really important factor to remember here is that we're using ground pork, which is absolutely essential. I have tried this with many other different kinds of ground meat. I tried it with ground turkey, tried it with ground beef. I tried it with various kinds of leaner cuts of meat, and it's really, really essential to have the extra fat that comes with ground pork. So if you don't like ground pork, if you can't eat pork, you could use anything else that is very, very fatty. So I love doing it with 80-20 beef chuck, works really well, and ground turkey also works really well because it has a lot of fat that will yield out of it. But if what you use does not have lots of fat, it's not going to sear properly. It's just going to burn, and then you're going to have a bad time. Carrying guns will make them stop. Yeah. There's actually like armed security patrol in Chinatown nowadays, which is even crazier. So I'm gonna mix up my meatball here, and basically what we're doing is just combining here. And what we should get is a nice, thick, and cohesive meatball. Do I usually post the recipe videos? Yes, I do. Those recipes, I don't have access to the chat right now. Sorry, my chat in RPAN is not working right now. I don't know what's going on with this thing. I will link the figure out how to link this recipe now. Let's see. Here we go. There we go. There's the recipe video. That's over on the YouTube channel. And yeah, I generally post those recipes up pretty early. They're out every Friday though, so if you're keeping an eye out, you can look out for them every Friday. Party train, cool. All right, so those are our meatballs. Let's see, the last thing I'm gonna do before I start putting together my meatballs is our braising sauce. So. Our braising sauce today is going to be comprised of a few different things, but mostly it's going to rely very, very heavily, or at least the thing that stands out to me the most, is the use of dark soy sauce and oyster sauce. It's going to have this really, really thick, dark glaze to it, or really thick, dark soy sauce quality to it, which gives it this really, really deep quality. Really, really deep and savory quality to it, which is what we're looking for. You sit through the long version, yeah, for sure. The YouTube video is going to be a lot more useful for if you're trying to reproduce what we're cooking, because I don't ramble nearly as much. I tend to ramble in these live streams a lot. So for our braising sauce, I'm starting off. That's 4 tablespoons of soy sauce, followed by a single tablespoon of sesame oil. Both are handy. Yeah, I've noticed lots of people have been starting to restream or rewatch the live streams, which I guess you could do. I honestly didn't expect that to be a thing that people did, but people have been doing it, so it's pretty cool. Next up here is 2 tablespoons of Shaoxing cooking wine, which is a Chinese cooking wine. If you can't find it, someone asked this earlier too. If you can't find it though, you can also use dry cooking sherry, which would be a next best thing. Oyster sauce versus fish sauce, yeah, that's a good question. Today we're using oyster sauce. The flavors of umami are going to be really, really similar. So if you're in a pinch, I always recommend, those are probably the 2 things that I would use interchangeably. What I always like to do, whenever you see me using oyster sauce, it's mostly, if I'm using oyster sauce instead of fish sauce, it's mostly for the color. So it has this really dark caramel color to it. And that's the color that we're looking for in our sauce today, is that really, really deep, dark brown color. And that's going to create the nice color in our sauce. But otherwise, the flavors of umami, they're very similar, so they're very fish heavy. They both come from the fermentation of fish. But what's really useful, I guess the one really useful thing to know is that the fermentation of the fish sauce quality, that's more commonly associated with things like Thai food and Vietnamese food, whereas oyster sauce is probably a lot more commonly associated with Chinese food. And it has a little bit more like caramel sweetness qualities to it. But if you're in a pinch, I often recommend you can use them interchangeably, though it might throw the color off a little bit. But you will, if you're like trying to get like that fishy umami, both of them are going to get you that. All right, so that's a single tablespoon of oyster sauce here, followed by, what is this? A single tablespoon of dark soy sauce. So that's very, very little of both. But I also always recommend, anytime that I work with those 2 elements, to remember that stuff is very, very thick and very, very concentrated. So use that stuff very sparingly, or else you will overwhelm your entire dish. And then next up is my favorite ingredient in this sauce, actually, because it kind of is very unusual and almost doesn't belong, this is going to be 3 tablespoons of sweet chili sauce, which if you're not familiar with it, I guess would be more colloquially known as the sweet and sour sauce that you eat with egg rolls. You'll probably see it on the Lazy Susan next to the soy sauce. But it has a really, really interesting sweetness quality to it that's really useful to throw into things like marinades and sauces, just to give a little bit of a hint of sweetness. And then the last thing that I'm throwing in here is going to be 3 tablespoons of lao gan ma, or like cooking chili oil. I guess that would be it, like chili oil crisp, something like that. Essentially what it is though is red chili flakes that are fermented in oil. So it has, I love red lao gan ma because it has this really interesting heat to it. That it's not super aggressive, so it's not like really in your face with anything. But it's like very, very subtle and very, very pervasive because it's soaked in that oil. So it like spreads throughout that dish really, really nicely, and you get this really, really interesting heat. All right. That's it. So this is our sauce. I'm also going to toss in some stock later on, but that's going to be it for now. Cool. Marina, yeah, you're all alone in the YouTube chat. I don't know where everyone else is. I guess there's other people on there, but no one's chatting. Cool. So I'm gonna start doing our meatballs here, and I forgot to write down the weight. I'm pretty sure it's supposed to be 3 ounces. Our goal here is to evenly divide these into 8 meatballs, and I'm pretty sure evenly would be 3 ounces. I hope I'm right. We'll see. I'm trying to be relatively particular about how heavy these meatballs are because we want our meatballs to be pretty close in size. Otherwise, if one is smaller than the other, they're going to cook very, very unevenly. So we want to pay attention to that. Otherwise, once we get to our wok fry, we're going to have a lot of trouble keeping these things accurate and even. So I got my scale out here. We're going to weigh these out to 3 ounces a piece, and hopefully that will end up being exactly 8. Where do I get the lion's meat? Yeah. So there's actually no lion's meat. I actually have no idea why it's called lion's head meatballs. It's actually made, so what we're using today is ground pork. But if you can't find ground pork, anything that has a lot of fat in it will work. So I love ground pork because it's super, super fatty. And it's going to sear really well because it's going to start searing in the fat that we render out of the pork. But if you can't find ground pork, the next best thing that I always recommend is 80-20 beef chuck or ground turkey, also really, really useful. But yeah, someone asked that earlier too. I don't know why it's called lion's head meatball. I think it's because of the shape of the meatball, but I might be wrong about that. That's funny. Yeah, I'm wondering if I'm actually going to make these meatballs the same size too. Alright. How's it going, Sarah, by the way? Yeah. Cool. North Shore Mike, yeah, it is nuts. I don't know what's gotten into the Chinatown neighborhood lately. Hopefully people stay safe out there. Cool. So I guess I should. This is a good time to say it. My name is Wesley. This is Woo Can Cook. If this is your first time tuning in, we're here every Monday, Tuesday, and Thursday at 6:30 PST, with new recipes coming out over on the YouTube channel every Friday. So if you haven't checked out the YouTube channel yet, that's where all of our recipe videos live. So if you've caught one of these streams before, pretty much everything that I cook on stream every week is based off of a recipe that I have already released. So this particular recipe for a lion's head meatball came out over on the YouTube channel. I want to say that was back in December or so, not too long ago. What we were doing is reproducing a meatball that you can find at a restaurant here in the Bay Area called Dragon House. I guess you technically can't find Dragon House anymore. I think we're gonna be off. Sarah, you were right. I think we're gonna be off. Yeah, I think this last one is going to be comically small. Yeah, so this recipe is based off of a meatball, lion's head meatball that you used to be able to find at Dragon House in San Francisco. Nowadays, Dragon House is gone. That restaurant closed down. I heard that the two old ladies that used to run it retired, which is nice. But the recipe that we're working off of today is based off of that original lion's head meatball that you could find at Dragon House. So it was part of a larger series that I've been doing where we've been reproducing things that come from places in the San Francisco Bay Area, so San Francisco, Oakland, Emeryville, the general like Bay Area, and sort of like reproducing some of those things. So here's our very, very tiny meatball. It is about half an ounce too small. So if you're interested in stuff like that, definitely hop over to the YouTube channel and check some of that stuff out. Lots of fun new content popping up every week. Coming up this Friday, so tomorrow, is our egg roll and lumpia recipe. Last Friday we did, what did we do last Friday? Pad Kim Mao. We did Pad Kim Mao, which is a really, really, one of my favorite chow fun recipes that come from Thai food. What else did we do the week before that? I think we did Chinese steamed eggs, which is one of my favorite Chinese breakfasts. I forget what we did before that. I think chicken katsu was in there somewhere. I can't remember anymore. But we have new stuff coming up over on the YouTube channel every Friday. So if you're interested in stuff like that, definitely hop over and check some of that stuff out. Meanwhile, over on the stove, I'm heating up my wok here. We're gonna get that going. We want that thing ripping hot, and then we're gonna start searing our meatballs. Yeah. At some point we're gonna nail it, or really at some point I'm gonna write down how much they're supposed to weigh. So we just did 3 ounce meatballs, and that's obviously too large. So I'm actually gonna write it down. I'm gonna shoot for 2 3/4 ounce next time we do it. Or what I think, like what I guess I should clarify. So what you should do, don't do what I did. What you should do is put your bowl on the scale first, and then tear the scale, so clear the scale out so that the scale reads 0 once everything is on the bowl, and then put everything into the bowl. So add your garlic, your ginger, ground pork, chestnuts, all of the liquids, everything. Get everything in that mixing bowl, and then see how much it weighs. So then you have an accurate readout of how much it should weigh. What we know is that we added 16 ounces of ground pork. So what it should have come out to is somewhere around like 2 ounces of meatball if we're doing 8, probably closer to like 2 1/4 if we're including those water chestnuts. I was kind of guessing, but clearly we were off. So, and I also forgot to tear the scale before I started making the meatballs. So if you're paying attention, that's what you should do. I forgot to do that, so we didn't really get to check. Have I made grilled beef spring rolls before? I haven't, but well, I guess technically kind of like something similar. What we did, so the spring rolls that we did, so in the video that's coming out tomorrow, we did like spring rolls / lumpia. As far as I can tell, I think someone's gonna get mad because I'm saying this, but I think those are the same thing. I'm pretty sure those are the same thing. They just come from different cultures. And the other thing that we did was egg rolls, Chinese egg rolls. And I used some, I think that was ground pork. I used ground pork, which is like kind of close. It's not grilled, mostly because like I don't do a lot of grilling because my barbecue kind of sucks. But yeah, a way document. I think like grilled beef spring rolls. I think that's usually found in fresh spring rolls though, which are made with rice sheets. So yeah, I talked all about this in the YouTube video that's coming tomorrow, but it's basically like the main differences are the way that it's wrapped. It's super confusing, but when you go to the store, if you're trying to make egg rolls and you're gonna go to the store, if you're trying to make egg rolls, like explicitly, if you're trying to make the thing that we all associate as egg rolls, the thing that you want to buy is not actually egg roll wrappers. They're called wonton wrappers, or sometimes you might see like wonton egg roll wrappers or something like that, which is very confusing. If you're trying to make the thing that we all generally associate with like spring rolls or lumpia, which are like those really like flaky quality egg rolls, those are made from spring roll wrapper or lumpia wrappers, not spring roll wrappers. Do not buy spring roll wrappers. A spring roll wrapper is made with rice sheets. So a rice sheet, those rice sheets when you make spring rolls are usually used to make fresh spring rolls, which are not deep fried. They're just, they come from Vietnamese food. They have like vermicelli in it, and they're eaten raw. So everything that's in it is raw, which is very different. You can't deep fry a fresh spring roll wrapper. It will probably just melt, I think, in my best guess. So it's super confusing. I don't know what those differences are, and like also what's even more confusing is that when I was a kid, and I'm Chinese American, and I've been making egg rolls since literally since I was like 4 years old, and I have never in my life made an egg roll that looks like the ones that were made at Panda Express. I've never seen an egg roll that looks like that in my house. The ones that we've always used are the things that are labeled as spring roll wrappers, which is super confusing. So I don't know. I did a whole bunch of research for this video, and then eventually I just decided, like, I don't know what the difference is. I gave up. Cool. So our wok is nice and hot. I'm adding, this is gonna be about 4 tablespoons of peanut oil. And then we're gonna give our wok a nice long yao. Try not to spill it. And then we're gonna sear our meatballs. This is gonna go, let's see, 4 at a time? I think this will be 4. So we're gonna sear our meatballs 4 at a time, and then I'm gonna let those go for, I'm gonna say 1 minute and 45 seconds. Usually I go for 2 minutes, but every time I make this dish, they seem to burn at 2 minutes, so I'm gonna pull them out closer to 1.5 minutes. But what's most important about searing things, especially meatballs, is that you gotta stop moving it. Don't touch it, just let it be for at least 1.5 minutes. Right around 1:15, you're gonna start getting really agitated and thinking that maybe it's burning. It's probably burning. Technically, when you're searing, it technically is burning. That is what a sear is. But it's searing in a very pleasing way, so, or burning in a pleasing way. Does my family watch and judge the taste test? Yes, they do, all the time. Literally all the time. My brother ridicules me for because my sourdough starter is too watery. My dad actually gave me a bunch of shit for using panko in this dish, because my dad, I guess my dad has been making this dish since he was a kid, and he said that the only way that you can make this dish is using cornstarch, not panko breadcrumb, which I have done before, and it's not as good. I'm sorry, it's just not as good. The panko makes for a better meatball. It's more tender, and I just like more toothsome, but my dad gives me lots of shit for using panko in this dish. Same with my mom. Yeah, totally. Yeah, so anything with lots of fat. Oh yeah, you get a choice when you buy meat in Scotland. Yeah, that's totally it. Yeah, so that's what when you see people refer to as 80-20 beef chuck. That's what it's referring to. So 80% meat, 20% fat. Ooh, that's right on the cusp of burning. And one of them burst. That's all right. So yeah, that's a lot of times you'll see that. I mostly only see it with ground beef, where you'll see, I think in America the reason that you only see it with ground beef is because people use it to make hamburgers. And if you're trying to make a hamburger, you can only make hamburgers with 80-20 beef chuck. You can't use anything else, or you're gonna get like a shitty burger because it's gonna be too lean. But yeah, I mostly only see it with ground beef, so you'll see things like 80-20 beef chuck referring to 20% fat. Sometimes you see 85-15. I more commonly see 85-15, probably because 80-20 sells out too quickly, which is 15% fat. I have tried this dish with, I think it was like 92-8 or something like that, which is a very, very lean cut of ground beef, and it burned. Like, it wouldn't sear at all because there just wasn't enough fat. It also gets like really, really chewy. But yeah, that's super, super useful if you're not familiar with that, like what those numbers mean when you're buying ground meat. Yeah, cool. Ooh, sea scallops. That would be a fun one. I was just reminded, I don't know if anyone watches Big Mouth, but we could do the sea scallops from Big Mouth. This is funny. I need egg of anything, please. Alright. Those are searing nicely. I'm just turning these on their side so we can get a little bit more sear on each side. And if you're not familiar with internal temperatures, what you want to go for, if you're not familiar with this recipe, is 160 degrees F internal. So if you're not familiar, get a thermometer out, stick it in there, and check for that 160. I've made this dish so many times that I really don't need to, I don't bother to check the internal temp unless I'm like cooking it for other people. That's just because I've gotten really, really familiar. I know what the texture of the meatball is supposed to feel like. But if you're not familiar, definitely get that thermometer out and check. I've read a lot of different things about like internal temperatures for pork. I also have read that the internal temperature for pork can go much lower because the FDA is like really paranoid. When I do pork, actually this is also true when I do ground turkey too, but especially ground pork, I like to actually shoot for a little bit lower than 160, probably like closer to 145, 150, which technically is undercooked and not safe for selling, not safe for consumption according to the FDA. But I actually think it's more tender and also perfectly fine. So it all depends on like how badly or how afraid of food poisoning are you? All right, those are looking good. Do I think this meatball mixture would make a really good hamburger patty, but technically it wouldn't. I guess it would be a hamburger or like a pork burger. I have seen a couple of different recipes that use filler, so it would be like a really, really chewy hamburger. I would say it wouldn't really taste like a hamburger. It would mostly just be like a patty, like a meat patty. Probably like closer to the quality of like a, let's go for a little bit longer, like a turkey burger. Because it has that panko in it already. So I've always been a stickler when I make hamburgers. I don't like to add filler because it like kind of ruins the texture of the hamburger. I want my hamburgers to be a little bit like crumbly. But that panko, because the panko is intended to bind the meatball together, if you tried to do it with a hamburger, it would end up just being like a little bit too chewy. But it would still taste super good. It would just be a meatball in a hamburger patty. Oh, one of these burned. We can look. This one burned. This is what we're not after. Try not to let that happen. All right, so our second batch going in. So for our second batch, we want to be careful here with this fourth meatball, this one right here. You can see because it's much smaller. So this is the danger of mismeasuring your meatballs. That smaller meatball, it's going to cook a lot faster because it's smaller. So keep an eye. We're going to want to keep an eye on that and make sure that it doesn't overcook. Lion's head. Aren't lion's head endangered? Yeah, horse bucket. Yeah, I guess that's kind of a good question. Yeah, so I don't actually know why it's called a lion's head meatball, but a lion's head meatball is not actually made from lion's meat. It's made from ground pork, which is what we're using today. But you can literally make this with anything that's a ground mince. So I've done it with ground turkey. I've done it with ground beef. We're doing it with ground pork today. You can probably do it with ground lamb. That would be like a pretty common thing to come across in a lot of Chinese food. Any of those things would work fine. Probably the most traditional thing to use today, is what we're using today, which is ground pork. Potato, potato. Yeah. Cool. So we're gonna let that sear for another, I'm gonna go for 1.5 minutes this time because we burned one of the meatballs last time. Yeah. Hello to everyone just tuning in. My name is Wesley. This is Brew Can Cook. If this is your first time catching one of these streams, we're here every Monday, Tuesday, and Thursday at 6:30 PST with new recipes coming out over on the YouTube channel every Friday. So this particular recipe is one that came out a few Fridays ago. I think it was a Friday back in December. But there's new stuff coming out every Friday, so if you're looking for new things to cook, that's a good place to check out. This Friday coming up, we have a recipe for egg rolls and lumpia. Last Friday, we did a pad ki mao, which is a Thai noodle dish that uses chow fun. Friday before that was Chinese steamed eggs, and then just new stuff coming out every week. So if you're watching over on Reddit, we're working our way to 4,000 subs by the end of the month over on the YouTube channel. So if you want to help us hit our subscriber goal, please hop over and subscribe. Mysterious Floor. Yeah, what are we drinking? Today we're drinking... What am I drinking? Rye. I'm drinking a Templeton Rye, which is a really, really cheap and affordable rye. That actually the reason... generally, if you see me drinking a whiskey and it's not a Scotch, probably the reason that I'm drinking it is because it's affordable and it tastes like a Scotch, which is true about Templeton Rye, is that it's like smooth in the qualities that you look for in a Scotch. As I've gotten older, I've discovered that like I don't really care about being adventurous with my liquor taste. I just like I know what I like now. So I used to be more adventurous with the things that I taste, but these days I just like Scotch. Cool. What else? Oh yeah. So we're working our way to 4,000 subs by the end of the month. So if you want to help us hit our subscriber goal, please hop over and subscribe. Tomorrow's my birthday, so if you want to do something for my birthday, please hop over and subscribe. Birthday stream. All right, so just like with our first batch, I'm turning those on their side. And basically what we're doing is the same way that you would treat any other meatball, so just like a Swedish meatball or an Italian meatball. We're rotating it on each side to try and get as much sear across the meatball as possible. The more sear that you achieve in that meatball, the more crispy it will be. So if you can't get the whole thing to sear, it's totally fine. It's still gonna cook through. But the more that we can get in that sear, the more crisp qualities that we're gonna have when we finish it. Sarah, yeah, thank you. 23rd, happy birthday too. 23rd, I think we'll be streaming on the 23rd. 21st is a Friday. And Saturday, 23rd is a Sunday. We won't be streaming. But we could do a birthday stream for Sarah on the 24th though. That's what we'll do. Maybe someone remind me. So again, I'm keeping my eye on this really small one. I'm making sure that we pull it out when it's done because it's for sure going to be done before the rest of our meatballs. I'm noticing that it's pretty close to being done already. Whereas the other meatballs are not quite there yet. Yeah. A man who knows what he likes. Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Oh, you know what? And I think our donate bar is not up to date. Sarah, I saw Sarah, you donated some money to it. I think the donate bar, actually, I think the subscriber bar is not up to date either. But Sarah, thank you for the donation. That was super cool. And I meant to update the donate bar, but I forgot. Yeah, almost there. Nate, what kind of meat? Yeah, today we're using ground pork. I mentioned this earlier too. but you could use any kind of ground mince that works, will work fine. So today we're using ground pork. I've done it with ground turkey, and I've done it with ground beef. I think I've also done it with ground chicken too, actually, and it will work. What's really important, more important than the type of meat, is actually the amount of fat. So we're looking for fat content here. We need very, very high fat content. So I would say anything that you would use in a burger would work well in this dish. So if you're going to use ground beef, something close to like 80-20 or 85-15 ground chuck, which is 20% or 15% fat. Either of those would work. But we need a lot of fat so that the fat renders out and it sears. So if you don't have lots of fat in your meatball, you're going to have a burnt meatball. So if we tried to do this with something really lean, so like a 92.8 ground meat or something like that, something that's really, really lean, what would happen is instead of searing, it would just burn, which is slightly different, but like a big difference in flavor, but very, very similar. So a sear is technically a burn, but it's like a controlled burn. A burn is just straight up uneatable meat. So we don't want it to burn, we want it to sear. And if you don't have enough fat, it's not gonna sear properly. Cool. Yeah. Yeet Guitar, that's a good username. Cool, yeah, thank you for subscribing. All right, actually I should point this out too, because this happens pretty much every time that I make this dish. So you'll notice in my wok, there is a whole bunch of fat. So there's all this pork fat that just rendered out. So most often I like to save that because it's very, very flavorful. But for this particular dish, because we have so much of it, that's too much fat to contend with. We don't want that to get in our sauce. And I've tried to work it in, but it's not going to be useful. So what I always do anytime I have this much extra fat is we'll want to pour that out. This is a grease trap, which is just where I pour all of my used cooking oil that we don't have anywhere else to go. If you don't have a grease trap, make sure that you get one, or just like set aside a jar for all of your used cooking oil. What you don't want to do is never pour that stuff down the drain. So if you ever tried to pour cooking fat down the drain, so like the fat runoff from your ground meat, fat runoff from your cooking oil, any of that stuff, don't let that go down your drain because it will absolutely clog your drain, and then you're gonna have a clogged sink, which is not fun. New. So what I did is I just poured out that cooking fat before I rinsed the wok out. So once the fat was out of the wok, then we can rinse it down. And then there's not really that much cooking fat that's going to come off after that. So, but if we had done that while all of that fat was still in the wok, that stuff would go down the drain, and then what it's going to do is it's going to cool down and it's going to coagulate. And then it's going to turn into a solid fat at the bottom of your U-bend, which is at the very bottom where gravity ends with your sink. So if you look under your sink, there's a J, I think it's actually called a J-bend because it looks like this. And right here, all of that fat's going to end up right here. And as it builds up, what it will eventually do is just clog the whole J-bend, which has happened. The reason that I know this is because I have fixed the J-bend in my sink, and it was super gross. So you don't want to have to do this. So do yourself a favor. Don't let that cooking fat get down your drain. Otherwise, you're gonna have a real bad time trying to fix your sink. All right, so the last thing I'm gonna do before we start our wok fry is wipe out all of this extra like junk that's stuck in the wok right now. So we can look, so this is what was stuck there. So we don't want any of that stuff to stay in the wok. Because all of this black stuff, if we leave it behind, what that is like all of the burnt parts of the things that we were searing. So it's all of the things that were in the pork, maybe some of the garlic, all of that stuff that was searing that didn't stay on the meatball. What it ended up being is just burnt. And if you leave it behind, it will end up in your wok fry. So we don't want to leave that stuff behind. Otherwise, you're gonna have weird burnt like flakes and charred bits in your wok fry. So anytime that you move on from a sear into the wok fry, make sure that you clean the wok out first. Otherwise, you're gonna have burnt stuff in your wok. You always learn something new. Yeah, cool. Thanks, Nate. Yeah. Yeah, cool. Junk belongs in the trunk, not in the wok. Yeah, exactly. Thank you, Sarah. Cool. So before we begin our wok, we're gonna wok fry. We're gonna add, that's another 4 tablespoons of peanut oil, and then we're gonna do one more long yao here. So we're giving our wok a nice coat of oil. And then we're gonna add our aromatics first. So first up is our garlic, followed by our ginger. And then we're gonna let this go in our wok fry just long enough until it becomes fragrant. So use your nose. It should be about 10 seconds. It's about how long I usually let mine go for. But start smelling. When you start smelling garlic and ginger, you know you're ready to move on. Next up, that's our baby bok choy in the wok. And then I'm just giving that a toss to combine. And then we're really after here at this point is to just let some of those leaves wilt. So we don't need to do much cook on that bok choy. Bok choy is super delicious. You could even eat bok choy raw and it would taste fine. What we're really after is just cooking off a little bit of that rawness so that we don't have like super crunchy bok choy. But we are going to be braising it too, so the flash cook, what we're really just trying to do is wilt some of those leaves a little bit and then just cook up a little bit of that crunchiness, so maybe like 10 to 15% cooked through. And then the rest of our cook is going to happen in our braise. So there's our meatballs, followed by our sauce. And then I go back and forth on this. Today I'm just going to use some water because I forgot to take the stock out. I oftentimes will use beef stock or chicken stock. Will work great here too. And at this point, once all of our meatballs are back in the wok, we want to be very careful with how we toss them. So we don't want to do any more aggressive wok tossing. We're not trying to like do any flipping, anything like that. We're done with doing all of that stuff. Because if you aggressively toss your wok at this point, well, a couple of things are going to happen. If you toss that wok with all that liquid in there, you're going to splash hot boiling water all over yourself. But the other thing that's really important is that your meatballs are very delicate, and if you have ever broken a meatball in a wok fry, it's the worst because you just spent so much time making sure those meatballs are nice and round and like cohesive. You really don't want to break those meatballs. Be very careful at this point. Don't go and like super like throw that wok around. We just want to keep that thing nice and simmering. That's it. We're gonna let that simmer for about 2-3 minutes, maybe. In the meantime, the last thing we're gonna assemble here, this is gonna be our cornstarch slurry. So this is gonna be 2 tablespoons of our cornstarch. Followed by a little bit of water. The amount of water is not super important. What's more important is that our cornstarch is fully dissolved. So we don't want to be dropping solid bits of cornstarch into our wok fry. Do I peel my ginger before mincing? Yes, I do. If you've never, if you're not familiar with peeling ginger, you don't have to. You can leave that skin on. Probably the main reason why I peel ginger is because if you don't peel it, you got to wash it, and I don't like washing vegetables if I don't have to, so I usually will peel it. But the other reason that I don't like that I peel the ginger is because sometimes when ginger gets older, it starts getting really tough on the exterior. So I've had some times where I've had really fresh ginger, which I have not found at the market of late. But if it's really fresh, you could tell because it's still wet on the exterior because it's like the juice of the ginger is still coming out of it. And when it's really that fresh, you really don't even need to peel it. You could just throw that stuff straight in and it will be fine. But when it's older and it starts to wither, sometimes that withered skin can get a little bit chewy. So I like to peel that stuff off. And then what we do is you don't need to use a potato peeler for that stuff. Just use use a spoon, and it works really well. Nate, if you're not familiar, but that's pretty much how every stream starts, is garlic and ginger. So if you haven't caught the beginning of every stream, what you do is just get the back of a spoon and then use it like you would use a peeler. And the skin of ginger is really, really delicate, so it will come right off. So no need to do potato peelers or any kind of like knives or anything. Very, very useful. All right, so I just dropped my cornstarch slurry in, and then we're gonna let that combine a little bit. And then I'm gonna let that go for another maybe 2 minutes, maybe even less than that. I'm just looking at the consistency of our fry here. I want that to be a little bit thicker before we pull it out. There's another guy pulling a cow out of another cow on our pan right now. That's crazy. Our pan is so strange. That's the best part about it, I guess. That's so strange. All right. So that's looking good. Last thing we want to do is give it a taste, which I very often forget to do. And it needs a pinch of salt, I think. I super often find myself correcting with a little bit of salt, especially because I been using low sodium soy sauce, which has a little bit less salt in it. So last thing that we want to do at the end of every stream, I've been saying this, but very, very important. The last thing that we want to do when you finish cooking in a wok, especially carbon steel woks, is give that thing a rinse and make sure that you get everything off of the wok while it's hot. So very important, clean the wok while it's hot, because once it cools down, you're going to have a very, very sticky surface. Things are going to start sticking, so we don't want to leave anything in the wok while you're eating. For example, very common. I used to do that all the time. And then I would wonder why I had so much trouble cleaning my wok afterward. It's because I didn't remember to pull it out of the wok while it was hot. If you do it while it's hot, everything will come out nice and easy. If you do it while the wok has cooled, once the wok has cooled down, everything is gonna stick, and then you're gonna have a lot of trouble getting that stuff off of the wok. Yes, Sarah. Yeah, thank you. Everything has 4 cloves of garlic plus 1 inch of ginger, and 4 tablespoons of soy sauce. Yeah, that's that's funny that it's burned into your brain. But yeah, that's pretty accurate. Like I would say, like 90 to 95% of every recipe I've ever written contains 4 cloves of garlic and probably about 1 inch of ginger. In this case, actually, there's actually 8 cloves of garlic and 2 inches of ginger, or 2 tablespoons of ginger. And that's because the garlic is in both the sauce and the wok fry, or both the meatball and the wok fry. Gordon Ramsay got nothing on me, yeah. Cool. There we go. Even this out. Yeah. There it is. Cool. Yeah, let's taste it. I always forget to taste it. Oh yeah, the panko. It's all about the panko. I think I'm right. I think my dad is wrong. The panko breadcrumb, it's like really, really chewy and like still really cohesive. So when you make it with cornstarch, you can make it with cornstarch too, by the way. So if you are like allergic to gluten or if you don't want to add gluten to your meatballs, you can absolutely make it with cornstarch. But when you make it with that panko, the gluten in the panko helps keep it a little bit more chewy. And it's just a little bit more cohesive as a meatball, whereas without it, if you just use the cornstarch, it's not quite as like dense, so you don't have quite as dense of a meatball, which maybe isn't quite as traditional as for a lion's head meatball, but it's one of my favorite qualities. It's also like really, really savory and aromatic because of that Chinese spice that we added, and that the braising sauce is really, really deep in umami because of the all of the things that we added. So there's dark soy sauce, the oyster sauce, and the thing that really pops for me actually is the sweetness that comes from the sweet chili sauce that we added. So really, really nice and tasty. One of my favorite dishes. This is actually one of my favorite things to eat when I was a kid. Was this dish, and I love that it doesn't have spinach in it, so I don't have to eat spinach. Yeah. Cool. Yeah. Thanks, guys. Thanks everyone for tuning in. My name is Wesley. This is Wu Can Cook. If this is your first time catching one of these streams, we're here every Monday, Tuesday, and Thursday at 6:30 PST with new recipes that come out over on the YouTube channel every Friday. So we got a new one coming out tomorrow, which we're going to do some egg rolls and lumpia, which is going to be really fun, and I'm super excited for it because it's one of the things that I've been making since I was a little kid, and I actually didn't have to do very much work to like make sure that my math was right on those egg rolls, because I've been making them since I was a little kid, so I already knew how to make them and stuff. So, most of the research that I had done was to try and figure out what are the differences between egg rolls, lumpia, and spring rolls, which is very confusing, and I don't know what the differences are, but we can talk. The YouTube video, we're going to talk about what I found out, and we're going to dive into all that research. There's a couple of different series that are going on over on the YouTube channel right now. Probably the one that's really popular is the Chinese American foods series, so we've been reproducing things that come from Chinese American food. So like General Tso's chicken, honey sesame chicken, a lot of things from Panda Express and PF Chang's, stuff like that. And kind of taking a look at what are those dishes are and like what are the American parts of those dishes. What do they look like without the American qualities? So that's like a really interesting thing to do with a lot of those dishes because a lot of them are not Chinese at all. They're really just American dishes. So what does it look like to do an American dish with a Chinese influence, basically? So very, very interesting for me, at least, because a lot of those are things that I have never eaten before. So like, I don't know, Beijing beef was one of my favorite ones. I've never even heard of it, and it was really interesting. It was like a deep fried tempura battered Angus steak, which is really tasty. So lots of stuff like that over on the YouTube channel. So if you're interested in stuff like that, please hop over and subscribe. We're working our way to 4,000 subs by the end of the month. So if you want to help us hit our subscribe goal, please hop over and subscribe. What else? This particular dish, lots of people like to tune into the YouTube channel because that's also where all of the recipes live for everything that I cook on stream too. So this particular meatball dish was a recipe that came out over on the YouTube channel. I think it was in December, sometime in the winter. I remember this is a recipe I did during the winter. That all already lives in a recipe form over on the YouTube channel. So if you're interested in stuff like that, please hop over and check out the channel. Cool. Yeah, thanks everyone. Yeah, so, yeah, that's exactly, yeah. Save the last egg roll to sop up sauce in the bowl. That actually, yeah, and I think the thing that I mentioned in the YouTube video is that the thing that lots of people don't realize is that when the egg rolls break, that's actually the best egg roll. It looks really terrible because it broke. So things are like flying out and it's not working. But what's happening once the egg roll breaks open and like things start coming out, is it exposes all of the little cracks of the egg roll. So what happens is everything gets a little bit more crispy because it has all of these like really weird nooks and crannies that are coming out because it broke. So that's the one that usually the one that where whoever's frying it will probably eat that one. When I made them most recently, I broke 2 of them, and I ate both of them without telling anyone. And that's actually, in my opinion, that's actually the best egg roll because it's got all of like, it's the most crispy egg roll. So super often people won't even serve it because it doesn't look right. It looks broken and kind of gross. It's a very unattractive egg roll, but it's actually the most tasty one. So yeah. Broken egg rolls, that's the real secret. If you've never had a broken egg roll, it's the best one. You're missing out. Cool. All right, thanks everyone. My name is Wesley, this is Wu Can Cook. Please tune in, we're gonna be back, let's see, on Tuesday we're gonna be doing, on Monday we're gonna be cooking, we're making egg rolls. So yeah, that's our last thing I'll remember to remind people, is that every time we do a recipe that happens on Friday, we'll probably do that recipe live on Monday. So most often, if you tune in on a Monday, probably the thing that I'm cooking is going to be the thing that we did a recipe for on Friday. So in this case, we're going to be doing we're releasing the recipe for egg rolls tomorrow, and then we'll be cooking through it live on Monday. So if you're looking for all of that, there's also a schedule of live streams over on YouTube, so you can check out what we're going to be streaming next. That all lives over there. Cool. All right, thanks everyone. I'll see you soon. Bye.
You're as sweet as strawberry wine. You're bad. Glass of brandy, darling, I'll stay stoned on your love all the time.
coming out of left field. Ooh, I'm a rebel just for kicks now. I've been feeling it since 1966 now. Might be over now, but I feel it still. Ooh, I'm a rebel just for kicks now. Let me kick it like it's 1986 now. Might be over now, but I feel it still. Got another mouth to feed. Leaving with the babysitter, mama call the grave digger. Gone with the falling leaves. Am I coming out of left field? Ooh, I'm a rebel just for kicks now. I've been feeling it since 1966 now. Might have had your fill, I feel it still. Ooh, I'm a rebel just for kicks now. Let me kick it like it's 1986 now. Might be over now, I can feel it still. We can fight a war for peace. Give in to that easy living, goodbye to my hopes and dreams. Stop flipping for my enemies. We could wait until the walls come down. It's time to give a little to the kids in the middle, but oh, until it falls, won't bother me. I'm a rebel just for kicks. Yeah, your lovers and a bitch for my heart to eclipse. Might be over now, but I feel it still. I'm a rebel just for kicks now. Let me kick it like it's 1986 now. Might be over now, but I feel it still. Might have had your fill, I can feel it still.
The club isn't the best place to find a lover, so the bar is where I go. Me and my friends sat at the table doing shots, drinking fast, and then we talk slow. If you come over and start up a conversation with just me, then trust me, I'll give it a chance. Now take my hand, stop, put Ben the man on the jukebox, and then we start to dance. Now I'm singing like, girl, you know I want your love. Your love was handmade for somebody like me. Come on now, follow my lead. I may be crazy, don't mind me, said boy, let's not talk too much. Grab on my waist and put that body on me. Come on now, follow my lead. Come on now, follow my lead. I'm in love with the shape of you. We push and pull like a magnet do. Although my heart is falling too. I'm in love with your body. And last night you were in my room. And now my bed sheets smell like you. Every day discovering something brand new. I'm in love with your body. Why, oh, why, oh, why, oh, why? I'm in love with your body. Why, oh, why, oh, why, oh, why? I'm in love with your body. Why, oh, why, oh, why, oh, why? I'm in love with your body. Every day discovering something brand new. I'm in love with the shape of you. One weekend we let the story begin. We're going out on our first date. You and me are thrifty, so go all you can eat. Fill up your bag and I fill up a plate. We talk for hours and hours about the sweet and the sour and how your family is doing okay. We'll even get in a taxi. We'll kiss in the backseat. Tell the driver make the radio play. Now I'm singing like, girl, you know I want your love. Your love was handmade for somebody like me. Come on now, follow my lead. I may be crazy, don't mind me, said boy, let's not talk too much. Grab on my waist and put that body on me. Come on now, follow my lead. Come on now, follow my lead. I'm in love with the shape of you. We push and pull like a magnet do. Although my heart is falling too. I'm in love with your body. And last night you were in my room. And now my bed sheets smell like you. Every day discovering something brand new. my baby, come on. Come on, be 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 my baby, come on.